Hello everybody, welcome to another episode of EricksonTV. Curtis here with Lauren. Hello Lauren.
Hello Curtis, hey everybody.
Hey Lauren, we usually do not talk a lot about our personal situations on these episodes, and I guess publicly I wanted to express my condolences to the loss of your father recently.
Yes, this is going to be a different video than we normally do on Erickson Wealth Tax Management on EricksonTV. But yes, recently my father passed away. And there are some things about it that soften the blow just a little bit. The time he landed in the hospital recently, that was his fourth very near-death experience.
Oh my.
So in some ways, that, you know, we had dealt with a little bit of this already. But what I really wanted to talk about in this video, because I don't want this to just turn into a video about my father, is I wanted to talk about something that I now feel really strongly about. I always felt strongly about it, but now I really feel strongly about it. Only a few months before my father passed away, I convinced my parents to finally go down to the attorney and get the medical power of attorney all worked out. Yeah. Get all that stuff worked out about you know, what kind of procedures you wanted done, what kind of procedures you didn't want it done, all of that kind of thinking. And I can say that I understand that for many people, the real grief when someone passes away doesn't happen until maybe even months later. So my opinion about this, you know, may change. But so far, my personal experience so far, when my father was in the hospital and dying, that was more difficult than after he was dead. So far. It is, until you've actually gone through this and had to make these kinds of decisions, it is almost impossible to imagine just how difficult it will be. So I'm going to try to explain a little bit about what my father's condition was to sort of to help people maybe understand. So he had already had, like I said, 3 near-death experiences that had damaged his liver and his kidneys and his lungs. So we're already talking about somebody who's in pretty bad shape.
Right.
So what happened was he was on a blood thinner to deal with a blood clot that has damaged his lungs. So he had to be on that. And then he had what apparently was just a fairly minor ulcer, but it was bleeding a lot. He didn't realize it was a serious problem. 5 days before he ended up in the hospital, he had just been to his doctor. They didn't realize it was a serious problem. So he was doing all the right stuff, getting everything checked up on, but somehow in those 5 days, the blood flow got really serious and he started suffering from massive internal bleeding in his stomach. And it got so bad that eventually his heart was only pumping blood to his brain, and that was it. The other organs weren't getting any blood. So when he went to the hospital, they pumped him up with a lot of adrenaline and just sort of pumped blood just straight into him. And after the first day, it looked like he might make it. Like things were actually looking fairly positive. But what happened is then all the organs that had been damaged during the collapse, they all just shut down. So it wasn't just, I mean, his kidneys, his liver, his intestines, his stomach. Body function. Yeah, everything was just shutting down all at once. Okay. So then the really hard thing comes. It's now 1, 2, 3. It's 3 days, well, 4 days after the collapse. He's sitting in the hospital, and basically, now it's finally gotten to the point where there are so many complications that his brain has gone offline. And what the doctor is basically telling us is we can't treat anything that's going wrong without making the other problems even worse. Okay. So now we've got to sit there and make the decision. And in terms of the decisions a lot of people have to face, we weren't even faced with such a hard decision. We have to make the decision, do we want to go for something just truly aggressive, which thankfully that, you know, or do we want to just sort of keep him the way he is now and just hope for something will improve, or do we want to unplug the medication that's keeping his heart pumping? Okay. In which case he'll probably pass away within a matter of minutes. Sure. Oh boy.
So that's a tough position for, let's say, your mom to have to make that decision.
Yeah, it's a terrible position to be in. Yeah. And I'll tell you, when you've already been at the hospital, tired, and spending all these hours there, and you're exhausted, and you're afraid of all these things, you're not in a position to be making good, rational decisions. Nobody is. Right. And then, the hospital has its own bureaucratic rules. Right. Well, they're just as useless because they're based on, just some sort of average case scenario.
Right. They don't want to take liability either.
Right, exactly. There's nothing to do with the person who's actually lying there. It was so helpful that my father had written down what he wanted done, and my mother could legitimately say that she was acting the way he would want her to act in that position. If it weren't for that, this would have been an absolutely horrible experience, stacked up on top of all the other horrors that we're already experiencing. I really, really, really want to encourage anybody who has not gotten this done to really think it through and get it done, because this is the final thing that I want to talk about today that's really important to me. There's no like simple answer to what kind of procedures you might want done or not want done. Just because you're very old, you might still want them to use CPR and resuscitate you if nothing else is going wrong. See, if all that my father was suffering from was heart failure, we'd have just, done the most aggressive thing possible. The reason why we eventually decided that we needed to let him go was because everything had failed.
Right.
So they were just.
But really, your father made that decision.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And what we were deciding in reality was how he was going to die,
right.
Not if he was going to die. But for me, I want them to resuscitate me.
Okay, yeah.
I want them to do whatever is possible, because
right.
I haven't had everything else already fail. It's different for every person. You can't decide what it's going to be just by how old you are. There's no like simple, easy method of making these decisions. It depends on what your value system is. It depends on everything. And so, make this easy on the people who are going to have to make the decisions.
That is first of all, I appreciate you sharing personal information. That must be hard to do, but it's very valuable that somebody can learn from this. My final takeaway is I'm amazed how many people come into our office for the first time and they haven't done this directive, or they haven't even updated their estate planning documents.
It's really important. I mean, the financial stuff we normally deal with, that's important too. But in terms of your family's emotional health, you cannot overestimate how important it is to get this done. If you haven't gotten it done, get it done.
Thank you for sharing, Lauren. We'll see you next time on Erickson TV. Bye now.
See you next time.